Shwmae a chroeso I Sgwrs, podlediad Consortiwm Canolbarth y De. Yn y podlediad hwn byddwch chi'n clywed y trafodaethau diweddara am bob math o bethau addysg. Hello and welcome to Sgwrs, the Central South Consortium podcast. In this podcast we'll bring you the very latest discussions on all things education.
Welcome to another Foundation Learning podcast. I'm Ruth Best, Area Lead for Foundation Learning at CSC, and today we're considering a topic that's close to every educator's heart, developing independence in young learners. What do we mean by independence? How do we nurture it? And why does it matter? Joining me today are three brilliant colleagues: Dr. Richard Thomas, Associate Advisor for Curriculum Teaching and Assessment at CSC, Claire Davis, Assistant Head Teacher and Foundation Learning Leader at Cyfarthfa Park Primary, and Rhian Derrick, Head Teacher of Caradog Primary. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks, Ruth. Excited to be here.
Great to join the conversation.
It's a pleasure to be part of the podcast, Ruth.
Let's start with the basics. When we talk about independence in children, what are we really referring to? Rich, I know that you've recently designed a model for this. Could you talk us through this briefly?
Yes, certainly, Ruth. Firstly, it's important that I clarify a few things. While I'm obviously going to champion this model, it isn't the only model available that describes the development of learner independence. It's also important to clarify that it's not specifically describing how to develop independence and effectiveness in only our youngest learners. Secondly, and vitally, the model is always robustly evidence-informed. If any of our listeners would like to delve more deeply into the model, an asynchronous resource is now available to access via our CSC website. So that said, allow me to provide a brief summary. Firstly, I believe that we don't just consider learner independence. We also need to think about learner effectiveness at the same time. A learner needs to be effectively independent. As we know, learner effectiveness is emphasised within Curriculum for Wales. It appears within the principles of progression as increasing effectiveness as a learner. In addition, personal effectiveness is one of the integral skills that together underpin the four purposes. So I see the development of independent and effective learners as the result of a sort of a two-pronged approach, consisting of two related but distinct elements. And these are developing the independent being and developing independent and effective learning opportunities. So if we take a very, very quick look, we'll start with developing the independent and effective being. So I see this as a need to nurture and strengthen students' characteristics, habits and traits, while also strengthening and expanding their repertoire of studying and learning skills. So moving briefly on to the second element, developing independent and effective learners. This describes the need for a carefully designed curriculum where purposeful opportunities are created for learners to practice, apply, or transfer their learning, the knowledge, the skills, the concepts, and the understandings that they've been taught previously. But doing this with increasing independence from the adults within the room, and all of this taking place at the right time. This doesn't necessarily mean doing so, that children do so in isolation of others, although this might be the case. It could equally be that students are working collaboratively on a well-planned independent task. So in such cases, of course, the ability to interact, collaborate and communicate are of vital importance. Success is dependent on the gradual release of responsibility at the right pace and at the right time from that of a more direct teaching approach towards greater levels of independence. So this is in effect the I do, we do, you do model. And this, if it's to be successful, needs to be informed by constant and purposeful assessment, feedback, questioning and observation.
Thanks, Rich. You mentioned there that there are characteristics and traits that independent learners display. So let's consider, what are some of the characteristics and traits of a young independent learner?
For me, Ruth, it's about a child being self-motivated and that inner drive to explore, to learn to get involved without needing constant encouragement. You can see it when a child walks in the room and just gets stuck in.
Yes, and it's also about confidence. Independent children are always willing to try new things, even if they don't succeed straight away. They're not afraid to speak up and ask questions or take a risk. That have-a-go attitude is key.
I love that. And when a child asks thoughtful questions and really listens to the answers, you know they're taking ownership of their learning. Curiosity is such a powerful driver, isn't it?
Exactly. And when they hit a challenge, they don't just stop, they problem solve. They try a different approach, they learn from their mistakes, and they keep on going. That resilience is a huge part of independence.
Absolutely. And let's not forget creativity. Independent learners often use resources in imaginative ways. So they're not waiting for instructions, they're exploring or experimenting and making connections to their own experiences.
That's such a good point. I've seen children link what we're doing in class to something that they did at home or on a trip. It shows they're really engaging with the world around them.
And they're often the ones that are helping others too, offering support to a peer, sharing ideas, or even showing a younger child how to do something. That sense of responsibility is part of their independence.
Yeah, and they're capable of setting their own goals. They know what they want to achieve, and crucially, they know how to get there. But at the same time, they're also flexible. So if something doesn't work, they rethink and they adjust. Research, not least out of John Hattie's visible learning meta-analyses, demonstrates that appropriate goal setting is highly motivating for students, and it has a strongly positive influence on student achievement.
So independence isn't just one trait then, it's a whole set of behaviours and attitudes: curiosity, confidence, resilience, creativity, empathy, and goal setting.
Exactly. And our role as educators is to create the space and support those traits to grow. It's about trusting the children and giving them choices and celebrating their efforts even when things don't go perfectly.
And remembering that independence looks different for every child. It's not about doing everything alone. It's about knowing when to ask for help, how to make decisions, and how to keep going.
Independent learners don't just happen, do they? So how do we as educators encourage independence and plan opportunities for learners to develop independence in meaningful, intentional ways? The Welsh Government, in their Enabling Learning Guidance, mentions 3 enablers as crucial to effective early years pedagogy. So I'd like us to consider independence through the lens of these 3 enablers: effective environments, engaging experiences, and enabling adults. All 3 enablers are interrelated, interdependent, and the interplay between them is integral to teaching and learning. But let's see if we consider each one. Let's start with environments. Claire, what does an environment that supports independence look like to you?
For me, it's all about accessibility and autonomy. Children need to be able to reach materials. That sounds so simple, I know, and they need to know where things belong and feel confident about making choices. I love using visual prompts like pictures, labels, or step-by-step guides so that they can navigate the space without always needing an adult.
So as practitioners, we need to consider whether we've set up our learning environment, indoors and outdoors, to allow them to do this. It's not just about letting them work on their own. Froebel talks about freedom with guidance, doesn't he?
Yeah, Froebel's philosophy encouraged children to explore and learn through play and self-directed activities, while educators provide supportive guidance and resources. This approach recognises the child's autonomy and encourages independent learning. One of the ways that we encourage freedom with guidance is through an online platform in my school. Pupils have opportunity to explore their environment and record their learning independently, digitally.
Yes, and I'd add that the environment should invite exploration. Open-ended resources, flexible seating, and quiet spaces for reflection all give children the chance to take ownership of their learning. It's about creating a space that says, you can do this.
So how have you done this in your school, Rhian?
In Caradog, we've spent a wealth of time researching our influencers, Reggio, Froebel, Elizabeth Jarman and Pete Morehouse, regarding creating inviting, accessible areas in the classroom, utilising natural resources. We like to think that our environments effectively support the development of independence and creativity. So, for example, when children first start, we put out most of the resources that they need to be successful in a task. However, as they become more independent and confident in the environment, we put out fewer resources. The expectation is that the children gather their resources independently, giving more autonomy over the resources that they would like to use. An example of this is that children are expected to get their own paint from pumps, learning only to use what is necessary to complete their task. We also have well-stocked stationery areas set up in all classes to support that. We purchase resources that are changeable and help to develop independent learning skills, such as block play resources, wooden sheds that become playhouses, shops, storytellers' cottages, etc., wooden structures for small world play to create landscapes with the children instead of a fixed small world house or a farm or a garage. We also use fabrics and materials and props as well as dressing up costumes in our role play area to encourage that imaginative play. We've activities boards in every class, books of ideas and chalkboards are used. We use talk, speak buttons and pictures in the early years, and these support us in giving children access to a greater range of experiences and scaffold their independent learning skills as well. We have through access to the outdoor provision with the same guiding principles and expectations as indoors as well. All children self-register independently and choose their lunch. We haven't mastered the rolling snack yet, but that's another suggestion if that suits your learners. In year 1 and 2, they have independent journals, which they use to document their learning, along with Seesaw. We also use music and Alexas to create moods, supporting both calm and excitement. The children love to ask Alexa questions about their learning and mini wonderings. We also have a sensory space and calm areas for children who need just to stop and reflect and think during the day.
It sounds as though you really thought about how you can create a space where children feel safe to explore and grow. But what about risk? I know that many practitioners worry about that.
I think managed, measured and appropriate risks are a vital part of the experiences that we all need to be exposed to, regardless of our age. So measured risks, for example, where learners are taken outside of their comfort zone and where they don't know what the likely outcome will be, can provide incredible opportunities for personal growth, such as the building of motivation, resilience, and grit. Failure it's a vital part of personal and academic development. So a key element here is that we ensure that every learner feels safe. They know that they're safe and nurtured in their environment. Julie Fisher, in her excellent text, Starting from the Child, describes the importance of risk-taking better than I can. So the following quote, which I slightly abbreviated in places, refers to risks within the outdoor environment. So, early childhood settings can offer physical development in a safe and secure environment. But that does not mean that they should be without risk. Risk is a valuable part of children's learning experience. If children do not learn how to approach and manage risk, then they become either timid or reckless, or unable to cope with the consequences. Risk enables children to make judgments about the physical world and their own capabilities. It gives them opportunities to try something challenging, exhilarating, and satisfying. Children must be willing to make attempts, experience failure and frustration, and then, in turn, find a determination to succeed, leading to the pleasure of feeling capable or competent. While educators are responsible for hazards that might be foreseen or assessing changing conditions such as slippery surfaces, it's crucial to keep concerns appropriate and to be able to articulate why the benefits of a certain activity make risk acceptable. So if I can sort of think of an example, roads are dangerous whenever there's any traffic, even when we use zebra crossings and pelican crossings correctly. So we can't eradicate all risk. However, we model how to cross the road safely using these crossings and using the green cross code. So we carry or we push our children in pushchairs or prams when they're very young, and we hold their hands as they're able to walk. But eventually they'll need to be able to cross the road safely and responsibly on their own. So if we take the example of eradicating all risk to an absurd conclusion, we would end up with teenagers or adults who've never crossed the road, and nor will they ever be able to cross the road safely.
Yeah, I agree, Rich. I'd also like to add that to encourage risk and independence, the physical and emotional environment must play a crucial role. As a nurture school at Cyfarthfa Park Primary School, we recognise the importance of the physical and emotional climate in our school. We know that this helps to develop happy, healthy and independent learners. It's important for me to mention here about the 6 principles of nurture, and these principles underpin the nurturing school approach. One of these principles is that the classroom offers a safe base, and this is throughout our school, not just in foundation learning. This means that a classroom environment should be inviting and nurturing for all children. It should offer a balance of educational and social, emotional and mental health experiences aimed at supporting the development of children's relationships with each other and with staff. Adults must be reliable and consistent in their approach to children and make the important link between emotional containment and cognitive learning. Where possible, predictable routines are explained and practiced, and there are clear expectations and positive models of how all adults in school relate to children.
So, if our emotional climate is right, children will be comfortable to make mistakes, won't they? Claire, you've just mentioned expectation and routines there. How important is it to establish these?
I'll pick up on the word establish there, Ruth. Adults need to persevere and have a lot of patience. Establishing these routines doesn't happen overnight, and I'm sure Rian will agree.
Absolutely, Claire. So learning independently doesn't happen on its own, and it's not established overnight. Children need quality play modeled to them and guidance in order to understand what is expected of them. In our nursery, no adults are timetabled into play-based learning activities for the first hour of the day. During this time, all adults facilitate free and guided play by modelling, playing alongside and intervening only as necessary. When establishing routines, timetabling your day sensitively is awfully important as well. Think about how many times that you are stopping the learning during the day and the reaction of the learners when you do. Try and open up your timetables to allow for uninterrupted periods of independent play and learning. Have a structure, of course, because this is especially important for our learners with ALN who thrive on those routines, but also allow for flexibility to be reactive and responsive to the learning as well. Ultimately, when teachers are engaged in a play-based learning task, you need the children to be independent to teach effectively without interruption. We use a 3 before me approach to further encourage independence. They phone a friend, they look around the room, and then we ask them to think again. Class rules and expectations are drawn up together in the first few days. Children are taught where things belong, that everything has a place, and that resources need to be looked after. Tidying up effectively is also a key skill that it takes daily practice to master and repetition as well. We put waggles in all areas to assist in with tidying up independently. There are also clear roles and responsibilities established for nursery children, lunchtime monitors, milk monitors, helper heddiw, etc.
So it really sounds, Rian, like you've really thought through about how you're planning these effective environments. How do you ensure that learners have the opportunity for practicing and embedding skills taught in focused teaching?
So we ensure that independent activities are authentic, contextual and linked to our themes, and they're activities in which children reinforce prior learning and skills taught in a different context. We call our independent time Amser V across the school. So during free, guided and play-based learning, children and staff note down mini wonderings and questions of interest that arise throughout the week, i.e. do all caterpillars have the same number of legs? Do all animals sleep standing up? These wonderings and questions linked to our topics are used to inform our Amser V sessions and tasks. And this ensures a holistic and purposeful direct link to that focused learning. Activities are well planned, they're engaging, they're challenging, they're open-ended, and sometimes 2-star challenges to extend the ideas and deepen the thinking of the children. Activities are reintroduced on a Monday with a classroom tour and discussion as well to facilitate that independence, just to remind the children what they could or should be doing during Amser V time. The provision is not changed weekly, it's adjusted and enhanced only when it comes to a natural conclusion as well.
Julie Fisher eloquently describes the importance of establishing independence, again in her book, Starting from the Child. So for brevity, I'll slightly abbreviate a couple of sections. But it's important here to clarify that Julie uses terminology that relates to the English education system, whereas we would use free play, guided play and play-based learning terms. So we just need to be mindful of that. But the principles are unchanged. So Julie says, For those working in reception classes and Key Stage 1, it is not possible to plan a teaching day that integrates child-led and adult-led learning, where practitioners need to spend quality time with individuals or groups of children, if the rest of the class are not able to manage independently. So it's valuable, therefore, to take time during the first of days and even weeks of a new school year to do two things. Firstly, making and building relationships with children on which all future learning will ultimately rely. And secondly, on teaching children independence, on which the smooth and seamless running of the integrated learning day will rely. So time should be set aside to teach the children to find and replace resources, to mix paint, to mop up and tidy away, to move from one activity to the next without recourse to an adult. The role of the educator during this time is to watch, to guide, and to support this with growing independence. Educators need to have time to show a child how to do something or to remind them where to find something. Establish independence and seeing this as valuable teaching and learning in its own right will be of long-term benefit to subsequent teaching and learning of the curriculum and to the focused use of high-quality time.
So you've both mentioned there how practitioners need to spend the time modelling and teaching children how to behave independently. And so when we move into engaging experiences, how do we design learning that actually builds independence? The curriculum for Wales often talks about authentic and purposeful learning. It's one of the key features mentioned in the Enabling Learning Guidance, along with play and play-based learning, observation and being outdoors. Claire, how does that support independence?
So when learning is authentic, it's rooted in real life. Children see the purpose and that then gives them ownership. They're not just completing a task, they're solving a problem that matters to them. That's what's really important. That sense of relevance encourages them to take initiative and make decisions for themselves. If the experience connects to something meaningful in the child's life, they're more likely to take the lead. I love project-based learning for this, where children help shape the direction of the topic.
Exactly. And when it's purposeful, children are more likely to stay engaged and follow through. They're not waiting for the next instruction. They're driving the learning themselves. So, for example, in our school, we have chickens. The eggs were cared for by the children, hatched and grown from chicks. The children fundraised £1,500 to create a permanent structure on our yard for them. They're looked after by a Eco Club who clean the coop, collect the eggs and let them go out for a run. The eggs are used regularly for cooking in school and classes, and the spare eggs are then sold on our yard to families for £2 a box, which is saved in a jar to buy food and bedding for the chickens. It's their own little enterprise business. We also have an allotment where we grow our own food to sell in the Parents' Hub. We plan to grow and take responsibility for the allotment in all weathers. These types of real life experiences motivate the children. They're authentic, purposeful and important to them. They speak passionately about both projects.
That sounds really exciting, Rhian. I'd really love to be a pupil in your school. But while authentic learning is essential, to maximise its impact, we must also consider whether what we're planning for learners is developmentally appropriate as well, shouldn't we?
Yeah, this is key. I think if we pitch learning too high, children become overly dependent on adults. And if it's pitched too low, then they can disengage. But when it's just right or within their zone of proximal development, they're stretched just enough to try things on their own, perhaps with a little support. And that's really where independence can flourish. So I tend to describe this as using the Goldilocks principle. We typically don't want the learning to be too easy, because in the zone, progress and development is limited and children are likely to lose their drive and motivation. But equally, we don't want the learning to be too hard because the children are likely to struggle and fail and they might panic and feel that they're disempowered. So we're aiming for the just right sweet spot, neither too easy nor too difficult, but instead where there is a productive but positive struggle. So here, learners need to really work for success, but they are able to achieve with varying amounts of support and scaffolding. So that's where the adult in the room employs effective adaptive teaching approaches. So this results in meaningful and motivational success, and this is central to building resilience in our learners at the same time.
And it builds confidence. They realise I can do this with a bit of help now and maybe on my own next time.
Yeah, and it's also important that guided play opportunities are developmentally appropriate and planned at the right level, and that the intended learning is considered before choosing the activity, that we're thinking about how we can stimulate learners' thinking and move the learning forward, not just a nice activity that we saw on the internet or in another school.
I agree, Ruth. Something that we do at Cyfarthfa Park Primary is Feedback Friday. So pupils are encouraged to think about their independent learning in guided play and discuss the learning that's occurred. We begin to develop metacognitive awareness through simple guided sentence starters. These prompts help pupils reflect on their learning choices and problem solving, even in the early years. So we introduce sentence starters such as, I learned that. Next time I will. I liked it when or I could do better by, I was proud of myself because. Depending on what the pupils feedback, this then leads into the next steps of learning for the following day or week. What I would add is that guided play is also observed by skilled practitioners. These enabling adults then use these observations to know the next steps in learning.
We have observation stations in all classes for children to independently capture examples of learning on Seesaw. Staff also use Seesaw to capture examples of quality and survey time.
Observation so important is in assessing where children are so that we can plan our engaging experiences at the right level. The guidance also mentions that the experiences we provide should stimulate awe and wonder. How does this encourage independence?
Awe and wonder spark curiosity, and curiosity is the gateway to independence. When children are fascinated by a snail trail, a shadow, a new sound, they start asking questions, exploring and investigating. They lead in their own learning journeys.
And it's often in these moments that they forget about adult approval. They're learning because they want to understand, not because someone's told them to.
Thanks, I agree with what you said there. Let's move to integral skills now, like problem solving and creativity. Rich?
Well, these are some of the tools of independence. If a child is able to think creatively, solve problems and adapt, then they won't require constant guidance from the adult. They become more confident at problem solving and decision making. And we can nurture that through meaningful and carefully crafted open-ended tasks and real-life challenges.
And by giving them time, rushing through the activities doesn't allow space for independent thinking.
So when planning, practitioners need to consider how much the task stimulates learners' thinking and give them time to problem solve. Let's talk about responsibility now. How does that link to independence?
Oh, responsibility is a huge part of it. When children are trusted with real roles, like leading a group, managing resources, or helping a peer, they feel capable. It tells them you're trusted, you can do this, and that's incredibly empowering.
And it builds that intrinsic motivation. They're not doing it for a sticker, they're doing it because they know that it actually matters.
That's so true. Now, let's touch on the digital world. Rich?
Well, we know that technology isn't the panacea. Like anything, can be used with a clear and beneficial purpose, or it could be used poorly. But digital tools, when used well, effectively, can certainly support independence. For example, if we think about a child using a tablet or a Chromebook to research something that they're curious about, or to record their own learning, this helps to give them control over how they access and share and record information and their learning.
And it's about digital responsibility too, learning to use technology safely and purposefully. That's a key part of being an independent learner in today's world.
Thanks. And finally, the other cross-curricular skills and appropriate challenge. Rhian?
So when we integrate skills like literacy, numeracy and digital competence into meaningful context, children see how learning connects, and that helps them to apply what they know independently across different situations.
Exactly. It's planning opportunities for them to practice and embed skills they've been taught in focused teaching through that guided play, isn't it?
Yeah, and challenge is essential. If we don't challenge them, they won't stretch. But it has to be the right kind of challenge, as Rich mentioned earlier on, and enough to push them, but not so much that they give up. That's where independence is built, right at the edge of comfort.
Yeah, I agree. It's absolutely, as I described slightly earlier, this edge of comfort, or the Goldilocks just right productive struggle zone, is key to developing so many elements, including motivation, resilience, metacognition, self-regulation. We want children to experience exciting and authentic real-world learning opportunities. We want them to experience a sense of joy and awe and wonder. However, we should always consider the purpose of the activity, task, or the experience. What is the intended learning? What knowledge or skills, concepts, or understanding are we intending to develop in our learners? And why is this? So how does this build upon prior learning? And how can we help children to make progress towards their next steps?
That's so true, Rich. It's really important to think about the why before considering the how when we're planning engaging experiences for our learners. And that leads nicely into the next enabler, enabling adults. We've touched on this. We did say it would be difficult to separate them, didn't we? So we've touched on this when we've spoken about how the practitioner creates the learning environment purposefully, plans for learning when considering engaging experiences. And in the guidance, it states that it's the enabling adult who sets the expectation for learning. We've talked about establishing routines, but it's not just about that, is it? It's about high expectations too. We believe every child can succeed, and we show that through the language we use and the opportunities that we provide.
Sometimes the role of the adults as enablers is not valued as a pivotal role in establishing adults' expectations. Staff often feel that unless they're engaged in a play-based learning activity, then learning's not taking place. We've got to challenge that perception with all of our staff. Children will find it increasingly difficult to become independent learners if an adult is leading for most of the day.
Absolutely, Rhian. And those expectations need to be shared across the team, across the school. When we work together with a shared vision, it creates consistency for the children. Whether it's a teacher, a teaching assistant, or even lunchtime staff, we're all part of that learning environment.
Absolutely. And the shared vision also needs to extend to the families as well. Good communication with home is absolutely crucial. If we keep parents informed, but we also listen, that's really crucial. They know their child best. And when we work in partnership with them, we can support learning in a much deeper and more effective way.
Yes, and everyone needs to be on the same page. So there's consistency of expectation for the learner. Independence doesn't just happen, does it? It's nurtured.
No, the adult needs to know the learner well to plan for the next steps, but also to react and adapt in the moment and modify the environment and experiences to help them become independent learners.
That's such an important point. Let's talk about how we support learning in the moment. Rhian, how do you use effective questioning?
So I try to ask open-ended questions that make the children think, like what do you notice or what might happen next? It's a way of scaffolding their thinking without giving them the answer. And sometimes the best teaching happens when you respond in the moment. You notice a spark of curiosity and you'll just follow that then.
Yeah, there's definitely a need for direct teaching as well. I certainly want to emphasize that. This ties back to the description that I provided towards the beginning of the podcast of my model for developing learner independence and effectiveness. We might explicitly teach and model or demonstrate a skill, for example, like how to hold a pencil or how to blend certain sounds. But it is then crucial that we provide children with the time and the opportunity to practice and explore this newly taught or modeled skill in their own way.
Yeah, that's where modelling behaviour comes in too. Whether it's how to take turns, solve a problem, or tidy up. We show them what it looks like, and Rhian has explained that earlier on in the podcast. And we narrate our thinking so that they can internalise those strategies.
It's so helpful to support the children, isn't it? And when they're struggling, how do you balance that support with independence?
It's about scaffolding and not rescuing. I might sit beside a child and offer prompts, but I won't do it for them. And the goal is to build their confidence, not their dependence on me.
It's like a dance, really. You offer just enough support to get them started and then gradually pull back. For example, I might show a child how to zip their coat, then let them try while I cheer them on. It's about knowing when to step in and when to let go. And that can be really difficult.
It can, and it's a balance really, isn't it? We need to scaffold just enough, ask those open-ended questions, model thinking aloud, but then step back and allow the children to take the reins. And sometimes the best support is silence and a watchful eye.
So as adults, we are the bridge between dependence and independence. We walk alongside them until they're ready to walk on their own. And sometimes we may come alongside them and work through a problem together, which is called sustained shared thinking, where we think and we talk and we have that narrative together when we're exploring the solution to a problem.
Yeah, and we celebrate the small steps too. So progress isn't just linear, but when a child achieves something they've been working on, we make a big deal out of it. That sense of pride is so motivating.
Exactly. It's in the little things too, isn't it? Like placing materials at child height or letting them choose their own activities, like we've mentioned earlier in the podcast. And when we give them choices, we're saying, we trust you, and that builds confidence.
It's so important that we show trust, and we trust them to make their own choices, solve problems, and even fail a little on the way to their successes. That's how they'll build their own confidence. And when we celebrate effort, not just outcome, we reinforce that growth mindset as well.
I agree. Praising effort is key. When we say you worked really hard at that, it helps children to learn to persist when things do get tough for them. Equally, describing and discussing the strategy or the approach that the learner has used is vital as well. So as is highlighting any particular characteristics or habits or traits that they've relied upon in order to succeed. And that returns to the model I described at the start of the podcast.
You're right there, Rich. We do need to be careful in the language we use. As Juliet Mickelber said, praise develops a desire to please the adult, while encouragement provides feedback and promotes independence. And as you mentioned earlier, Rianne, we want their motivation to be intrinsic, not just to be doing it to please an adult.
That's so true, Ruth. Moving on from that, I'd like to talk a bit about responsibilities. So we also give our children responsibilities, like being the line leader or watering the plants, for example. These roles give them that sense of ownership and pride, and it's amazing how seriously they take it.
That's so true. And what about emotional independence?
Adults help children name their feelings and find ways to manage them. It could be as simple as saying, I see you're upset, do you want to take a break? And over time, they learn to self-regulate.
And social independence too, so learning to share, take turns, we've mentioned this throughout the podcast, and resolve conflicts. We guide those interactions, but we also give them space to figure things out.
And as adults, we need to be reflective too. Reflective practice helps us to ask ourselves what's worked, what hasn't worked, how can I adapt? It's how we grow alongside the children.
And if when we reflect, we can ensure that all three enablers are working together, an effective environment that supports choice, engaging experiences that spark curiosity, and enabling adults who empower, then we're really setting the stage for independence to flourish, aren't we? Well, thank you all for your insights. And to our listeners, keep reflecting on how your effective environment, your planning of engaging experiences, and your presence as an enabling adult can empower children to become confident, curious, and independent learners. But from us now, it's goodbye.
Diolch am wrando ar y benod hon o Sgwrs. Cofiwch ein dilyn ar Twitter a Facebook, tanysgrifio ein sianel YouTube, ymuno yn cymunedau ar ein gwefan a darllen ein bwletin ysgolion wythnosol am y newyddion diweddaraf. Thanks for listening to this episode of Sgwrs. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Join our online communities via our website and read our weekly school bulletin for the latest news. Hwyl am y tro. Bye for now.